Hello, and thanks for stopping by and joining me, Josie Purcell, at Photopocene, the podcast sharing eco-conscious photo art in an audio way. This time, it's been great to speak with Stig Marlon Weston, who's based in Norway, all about his photographic work and his travels to create it. We head over to the Amazon jungle, the Montserrat Mountains, and to Stig's local forest to find out what motivates him to create his work. There's even mention of a poisonous snake. I also loved hearing about Stig's ongoing Artist's Proof project that involves asking random people to be involved in the making of work. You can find out more about Stig's work at weston.no, and all the links will be in the podcast text too. I hope you enjoy. I'd like to say a really warm welcome to Stig Marlon Weston, who's joining me for this episode of Photopocene from Norway. Now, Stig predominantly works with cameraless photography, and I have to say that makes him a person after my own heart. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation and learning a lot more about his work and what makes him tick. So hello, Stig, welcome.
Yeah, hello, Josie. Thanks for inviting me into your...
Oh, I'm really glad you're here. I'm really am looking forward to it. Now, one of the things that I understand about the way that you like to work is that you're quite interested in the different ways of looking at the world. And that's sort of an influence on your work. What's your personal relationship towards photography then?
Well, I grew up with a dad who took photographs of all our holiday travels and made photo albums. So I really enjoyed watching him making these albums and seeing how he would narrate our travels and holidays. So I guess it kind of started there. I have also been interested in how we see things differently, how we discuss and how we understand the world differently from each other. And then, looking at photographs, you often get somebody else's impression of how things are. Me interested in photography as well. And it's that, like you said, that I'm really most engaged in myself. So much showing my view of the world, but I'm interested in seeing different ways that I or others can look at things around me.
Absolutely, and I can see that in the work that you've created, and I think the way that you're working as well, sort of removing the camera. I think you do work with cameras as people perceive, normal cameras, shall we say, on occasion. But this working without that light collection box, shall we say, but working more within the elements. So the images that when you create them and when they exist and people are looking at them. Is that what you mean when you say sort of all the different ways of seeing?
Yeah, it's a case of how the camera kind of replicates the eyes or our mind's view of the thing we're looking at. So right from the start, when I went to photo school and we started this, how photography is true or not. It is this base of photography where the camera to show just a small glimpse of the world or crop of whatever you're looking at. So it tells just as much about what you were looking at as it tells about what was happening around you.
Yes.
And I use a camera. I work as a photographer, but I really enjoy the way the material itself can choose to look at something else than I would look at, and then show me something new, and not the thing that I was looking at, but maybe something I missed.
absolutely missed. Yes, or something that you might never have been able to see with your own eyes.
Yeah.
Without using that process. I mean, one of the latest works that you are creating, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's been inspired by your participation in an arts residency at a science station in the Amazon rainforest, which, you know, just sounds absolutely incredible and amazing. But what can you tell us about that? How did it come about, and how did being there inform the creation of the empirical series?
Yeah, the artist residency is organized by a cultural group in Brazil, and it's rainforest nature reserve that is made specifically for scientists. So it's a part of the forest that has been protected since the 50s, I think. It's one of the oldest rainforest reserves. It's not that big, but it's big enough to be natural. And then it's been used for a long time. So it's set up with a science camp inside and with pathways that are kind of hidden, but still are there for the scientists, not disturb the jungle. And this group invites artists go there as a group and inspire each other, learn from the scientists and make work. I just happened to see this at that it was possible to apply for this. It's open for everyone. And I had already done work. Yeah, you should. Problems organizing it last year and this year, but yes, I'm sure it's going to happen.
Fingers crossed one day,
yeah. I had done work with the Norwegian forest at home and my kind of hometown forest. So I was curious about going somewhere else and doing something with the forest somewhere else. And I hadn't really decided to go and what to do. And then I applied for this. And for my practice, it has been really useful to not plan everything. Somewhere, do something that challenges me in how I work and what I'm going to do, so that I have to go there with an open mind and try to make things work out, even though I don't know exactly how I can do it.
So a letting go of complete control.
Yes, absolutely. Is an important part of making art. It's easy to think that you learn how to do things and then you do it, but if you're really going to make art, you need to make something new. You need to challenge yourself and not be sure about what you're going to do, and then you find something new, and that's
yeah, absolutely. It's a lovely way of looking at it. And your images that you've created through this project, I mean, obviously on site, and all of the elements that will influence these pieces of artwork. So from the temperature, from the amount of light. I mean, when you were working there in the rainforest, were you actually, I mean, this element of not being in control, how was an average day there then for you? Or was it an average day?
Yeah, no, there wasn't any average days, I would say. But I realized coming there that I had to make a proper schedule and a plan because this was a science camp. We had lectures with the scientists, learning about how they work. And I really wanted to make something then that was inspired by this method. So I wanted to both make pictures that were created according to like scientific rules of both random choices and an orderly collected fashion, so that you can compare the different random choices and try and see patterns in them. So I made the schedule of every day early in the morning, going out in the forest and placing my photo paper different places as to collect samples of the light and the landscape, and then making lumen prints. I left them there until the next morning, and then I came back 24 hours later, picked them up, and set a new set of samples to collect the next day again, and made a schedule for this. And in addition, after I'd done this, I spent the rest of the day making other series the same kind of way. So I always had going to make as much out of it as possible.
And you used obviously the flora of the jungle, but you use soil as well, and the river to look at water quality, which is really fascinating. What did you find was for you? I mean, was there a favorite place to be within the jungle when you were creating this work, or a favorite time of day then?
Yeah, it's well, first the different parts of the jungle. What I learned from the scientists there is how it's made up of different parts, but it's the soil and then the plant life and the water that is really the base of it. All the animals that we normally see in nature photography are kind of an extra. A lot of them do important things in the ecosystem, but they're there, but they're not the base that everything else lives off. So I chose to focus on this, these more still and permanent parts of the landscape.
Yes.
Really like the early morning. I did. Then getting up early, and I brought the hammock so I could sleep outside, and waking screamer howling monkeys.
Oh, wow.
There when it's still not really that hot, and quiet but loud quiet of the jungle.
I have visions of one of the monkeys coming along and trying to steal your work. So
yeah, luckily that didn't happen, because leaving things out there until the next day, you don't really know what's going to happen. But I managed to retrieve most of my paper and find the places I left them. But I had some really nice experiences of monkeys in the trees above me, or birds almost stepping on a toe. And but then I had this one experience screaming and then going all quiet and feeling like, oh, there's else out here. I gathered my things and walked back. We weren't supposed to walk by the scientists and the guards there. They really wanted us to have other people with us and walk as a group. So it felt safe. And then later I realized maybe it wasn't as safe, because this was truly a wild nature reserve. On one of the trips, we had a guide, and he suddenly leaned into a bush and grabbed a snake, and then told everyone that this is the second worst poison in the world. If it bites me, I'll die right away. So you wear boots and you thread carefully.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can imagine must have been an amazing experience, but the work you have created from it as well, I think is testament to what you've been able to create within the jungle. It's beautiful work, and I'm quite fascinated because you mentioned there around that you've worked in a local forest to you, and you've used whereas lumen printing, like as in empirical, is made on sort of the lumen printing process, but with this Grove series, I believe that's made with film in the forest. So how did you go about creating that then?
Yes, that's right. I started out experimenting with photography in the darkroom and made photograms on paper, like most people do. And then I got hold of orthochromatic film that is not red light sensitive. It's easy to work with in the darkroom. And I managed to find really large rolls of this, like meter wide, large sheets. And I did as part of this idea of challenging myself. So whenever I feel secure in my method of how I work, I want to go somewhere else and do something else.
Yeah.
I went outside, and because it's film and it's photograms, it's necessary to work in the dark. So I went out at night, and I really wanted to do something in an area that I knew well and I had a connection with. So growing up on the edge of town, to go skiing or playing or hide and seek in the forest. So I went back to that area and made prints of the night. So it's dark winter night in Norway, and there's lots of snow to crawl through, and then hanging the film in the trees, because it's several square meters of film. I can capture large things. Small pieces of film, you can only do photograms that are small, but this is big, so I could capture a whole tree. And kind of easy, but still physically hard work process.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you have with this series then? I mean, the images to me when I look at them have that, you know, that almost what people might think of sort of the traditional fairy tale, European fairy tale, sort of looking through a forest. And it just has a really sort of beautiful, but almost a slightly dangerous element, if that makes sense at all, when I'm looking at the work. So did you, when you actually started to create this work, having decided the material that you would use, did you have an idea of what you might want it to say to people, or are you sort of, as we spoke before, sort of letting people sort of come to their own conclusions about the work?
Yeah, I'm happy with letting people see what they want to see, but I also believe as an artist, I need to an idea what I want to show. And if this gets across or not, I don't know, but I need to know what I want to tell. So I look at this work. Started out with the idea of the process, but also in combination with the idea of place. Again, it was about looking at something and trying on photographic material, someone's look at this, someone else's eyes. And for me, the process is something that lets this happen. And then I have to find a process where it can happen in a different way. Trees, I hang the film in the tree at night. I can't compose my picture as such. I don't frame any specific part of the forests directly. But the film is in the tree and around the tree and look at it from the other side. So I can see the film behind the tree.
Okay.
And when I expose it, when I turn the flashlight, I can see I can see the film. So the process is kind of me looking at the film, but the film itself looks back at me. So the picture will show view of somebody hiding behind the tree, looking out towards the light from the dark. And this is the kind of scary part, I think, because you see you see the one that is in the wild looking out.
Yes.
And the process itself not being how we see the trees is for me more a description of how the trees are experienced if you don't have a language that can, because we see things and we describe it in our head. But an animal child that doesn't describe things, just experience it, I believe this is somehow the way they would experience the trees in the forest.
Mm-hmm. And is working within nature then sort of a really important part of your personal photographic work, or does that influence the way you work with photography overall then?
Yeah, it's not consciously a conscious decision, but I started out wanting to that were somehow neutral, that just show that can show how I see them, not what they are. And then the landscape is in a way the world. It's just our surroundings. It is what we are in. So it has been a good to use. It's always tied to a specific place somehow. So that's also why I've needed to and move around to find different places that are more connected, different ways of looking.
And traveling around, that brings me to then one of your series called Divinations, which was made in Spain in the Montserrat mountain area. And I think with that you've chosen a number of different process types, so you haven't necessarily decided to stay with one process. Is that something that then evolved for you when you were in the place? How did that come about?
Yeah, that's another part of this challenging myself. So I felt like I'd done photograms for a long time, and I had just started trying out, and I'd had the idea of making lumen prints. I haven't been one to read a lot about alternative processes, so I hadn't looked up lots of other people doing things. I just went there and I thought, oh, I should try out this. I should try out lumen prints and see if I can make this idea work, even not really knowing that other people were already making so I had some ideas of processes I wanted to try out, and then when I got there I figured that the place itself lent the theme to me and made me want to do things in certain ways. I tried out a lot of different things and then I decided what fit. And I had wanted to try out lumen printing, not knowing what it was called, but I had never really been interested in pinhole photography. But while I was there, I realized that I should do some. So that was my first go at that, and I felt like I had a good reason to while I was there, making these tiny cameras like eyes that I could place places to look at the landscape.
So that was within the sort within the air, several different areas then in the mountains. Is that right?
Yes.
Amazing.
It's a whole. It's a small mountain range, so you can walk all around and across it, and it doesn't take too many days, too long time to get to know the place. But it's it's a large area.
So if you had to, if I had to say to you, is it possible to tell me what your favorite or preferred process is, then would you be able to answer that, do you think? But like you say, you're continually wanting to challenge yourself and not necessarily just stick to one way of working. Do you have a favorite at all?
That's a hard question. Yeah, it's been different projects, different themes where I choose to. But I do really like the idea of working with film. So I always enjoyed making these photogram films because then I have negatives that I can print and do something more with.
Yes.
This choice of having a negative that I can make prints and continue working with, while
Yeah.
the other prints are on paper and they're already there, so they are more original, and that's another nice thing to have.
Yeah.
But I think I'm still not finished with this other project I've been doing for many years on the side that I call Artist Proof.
Okay.
It's me trying to document that I am an artist,
Okay.
proving proving my own work. So instead of doing myself, I bring with me pieces of film, and I give the people I meet when I meet them as an artist, and then I ask them something with it, and I take the film back and develop, and then I can do my part interpretation of how I want to print it.
Okay.
And it's been interesting. Sometimes it comes out great, sometimes it comes out like almost, but it usually fits the situation and the meeting.
And what would you say has been the most surprising result then from asking people to, to collaborate with you in that way? Have you had some, what's been perhaps the most surprising result?
Surprised by how things come out in a way than I would have managed to do myself. I was part of a group, and the curator was also a experimental abstract photographer, and there were different kind of artists in the show. I gave out film to all the other artists and the curator at the opening night and asked them to make somehow a photogram impression of their own work. And then I took all the film and combined it and made a series of prints. And the strange thing was that all the prints came out looking like the curator might have made. Not like we were different artists, but they all looked like her work.
Oh my goodness. So with this then, this sort of, you've called it Artist Proof, and it's you're a work in progress. Do you feel then with photography, obviously photography for me isn't definitely an art, and but there is obviously, there's a potential differentiation between what people might perceive as straight documentary or recording scientific types of photography and the more creative aspects. And it's I guess the one that is seen as, is photography science, is photography an art? It's perhaps been a question that's always been around. But do you, as a photographic artist, then feel that this project it validates photographic art in some way, or that we need to do that with photography?
I'm not sure if we as photographers can do that. It feels more like it's the audience, the viewer, who needs to see it as art. And that is a difficult challenge to give them, because everyone is so used to seeing photography everywhere with different functions. So as a medium, it's not art necessarily. And then when you see something that is photography, you have to figure out if it is art or not. And somebody might tell you it is. It's in a gallery. It is very expensive. But that doesn't necessarily convince you that it is. So I find that with experimental photography, it shows people something that isn't what they expect to see in photography. And therefore it makes them either dismiss it outright or look harder. And when somebody looks harder, it is more accepted as art in their mind, I think, because they need to add their own feelings somehow.
Yeah, and sort of make sense of it themselves. And but I guess the part of this way of working that you are handing over elements of its creation, aren't you? to the people you collaborate with. So it is very much a tactile, immersive process for both parties. Is that how you would see it?
Yeah, I would, and that is an important me. Either if I like give film to other people and ask them to contribute, or just showing work to somebody else is asking them to contribute at it. And it's this part where maybe straight photography is too easy to look at, because really a lot of straight has so much depth and so much art in it that you really need to give it time, and you need to work it through your mind properly. But because we recognize what it shows or what it looks like, we don't give it the time. And if you show something more complicated, people have to give it time or know that they haven't. I like showing people my work to make them not just look at the picture, but also somehow look at or start thinking about interpreting it, how they're understanding what they're looking at. Because this is important in all art, but we don't always do it.
No, and I definitely I agree with you there. It's sort of that sparking of an idea or a conversation or a different way of seeing or thinking about something, maybe whatever it is for that person. It's amazing when something, as an artist that you've created can do that. But we've talked about the work you've created at home in your home forest, that you've been to Spain, and you've obviously your time in the Amazon. I mean, I would say that landscapes and locations are obviously an inspiration for you, but where else do you find inspiration for your work? Is it in other people? Is it in other disciplines? Do you write? Do you draw? Do you, where else do you sort of look or feel that, that's something that informs your work?
Well, I do appreciate looking at other people's work all the time and trying to keep up with what's going on with other photographers in my area, around in my kind of photography. I also run a studio and a studio gallery and a darkroom in my hometown, where there are other people working. So I do organize exhibitions for other people. And I'm always inspired by seeing other people's work while they're still thinking about it and discussing it with them. And I find this is really helpful for myself, because it's easier to look at some while it's being made and say, oh, maybe you should try this, or how do you explain your idea? And it's yourself. But by asking other people these questions, it's easier to ask myself the same hard questions while I'm in the process.
So do you work with, I mean, that sounds like my idea of a wonderful career to be able to have a personal practice and then, like you say, be immersed with working with others in the gallery and curating exhibitions. I'm very envious. But what would you say then from all of these different elements of photography? If you had to choose one, is that possible?
I don't think it's possible. I see other people choose, and I can see that works well for them. But for me, I don't think so. I remember when I studied, I tried out all kinds of stuff at school, and reading about history of photography, I realized I was I felt like I was moving through history by starting out and doing the early things, and then later, and I saw how people had done it. And then I learned that you were supposed to choose and focus and somehow find your thing to do. And I thought that was what I had to do. When I finished school, I asked my favorite photographer if I could be his assistant. And he said, well, I'll have a meeting, but I don't think I have space for any. And I showed him my portfolio, and it was all over the place with different. And I told him that, yeah, I need to choose. What should I choose? And he said, don't. He thought it was the best idea to keep being diverse and doing different things to keep everything moving and being inspired by the change in what you're doing. Of course, he was the same kind of photographer who was doing a lot of different stuff, and that was why he was my favorite. So I guess I got what I asked for without knowing. But I stayed with that afterwards.
I like that. I like that, and I think that's quite important, because people can sometimes, whatever roles they take in life can often feel sort of shoehorned into going down a certain avenue that actually, if we allowed ourselves a bit more freedom, sometimes it might sort of be beneficial. And it's really nice and refreshing to hear that, yes, you can try and do a lot of things, and you don't just have to settle on one way of being.
I'd like to add, though, in there that I would advise people to try and focus on a few things, and periods of time, try and focus on one thing. That it is important to work hard enough in one direction to actually make progress. I feel like I have been slow in going in all directions at the same time. So that has been a really enjoyable journey, but it has taken a longer time than if I had managed to somewhat in this direction and then somewhat in another. So my advice would be to make sure you focus on some things at the time, always have at least 2 or 3 projects running and think term. So I didn't go to at the same time also making some of these artist-proof pictures. And I've gone back and done some more forest while I've been doing other things. And I have projects that I haven't shown to anyone yet that are in the background, but that are there to just keep me on my toes somehow and make sure that I have something else in the future that I can focus on.
I suppose
that isn't just
sort of longevity as well, and keeping things fresh and exciting as well, I suppose, for yourself.
It is easy to do something and then you start out and you think, oh, I did this well, and then you continue because you don't want to do something bad. Well, it's something else. And you continue doing the same, and that doesn't really move. So focus for a while, do something, but at the same time have something extra that you don't do deep, and make sure you know the difference between those.
Absolutely. I guess I'm sort of taking that as you can experiment, but perhaps not be haphazard in your experimentations so that you never actually a bit like a pinball machine.
Yeah. Good image.
It's really interesting to hear the sort of the ways of working as well. So one of the things I always like to ask people who take part in the podcast is, I can obviously see your connection to the natural world coming through your work, and not just through lots of different elements and strands of your work. But what do you think photography can do to actually influence environmental thinking? And for the work that you've curated that sort of speaks of nature, what influence do you think that will have? In those sort of areas of environmental work.
Yeah. I've listened to your podcast, and I see photographers talking about how the process and the chemical materials they use should be environmental friendly, and that is important and it moves things. But I also think it's maybe just as important to think about how your images the viewer and the public and what kind of themes you bring up. Photography, there is a tendency to aestheticize, make things beautiful. And I find this a bit dangerous, especially with landscape and nature photography. If we don't show how things really are, we will not realize how far gone we have come in destroying the environment. And the world in its own right, how it really is important, whichever way you do it. But all these Instagram photographs of lovely sunsets and open seas and clear forests is not really showing how it looks most places. So I think being true to what you see in the camera or in front of your material is important. Just to they should also open their eyes.
Yeah, and I think in the life of photography and the influence it does have on us in the everyday, people will always, I imagine, if pushed, be able to talk about an image that's really had an impact on them in some way, form or another, in relation to environment or humanitarian issues. So yes, I think sort of bearing witness, isn't it, in that sense. But for you, what is next then, Stig? Have you got obviously the situation we are in with the pandemic, and hopefully, let's hope that things can and will improve. But what's next for you on the horizon? Any shows, exhibitions? Where are you sharing your work?
The coming months, I'm going to show my Amazon project at the Copenhagen Photo Festival in June.
Okay.
And I'm hoping people will come. I'm planning to go there. And they will have a display outdoors of these pictures, so it will be COVID friendly.
Yeah.
I'm also shipping one picture to New York to the Soho Photo Gallery. They had an alternative photography competition last autumn, and I got in with one pictures. So there you can actually see one of the originals.
Oh, brilliant.
And I'm hoping that I can go to Barcelona in July for the Experimental Photo Festival there. It's
fantastic.
Yeah, it's a festival that has a program of workshops and lots of happenings where you meet people working in all kinds of experimental techniques. So I'm really hoping that works, that people can go there, and they are planning to make it a really good event this year. I'm going to do a workshop on portfolio presentation, about how to talk about your work.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, that sounds amazing. And I'm well, you never know. I might try and get there myself. That sounds really fantastic. But if people can't physically get to those shows or festivals, where can people find out more about you? Your website, any social media, or any other sort of online avenues that they can have a look at your work?
Yeah, I'm lucky enough to have an original name with a Stig Marlon Weston. So if you search, you'll find my Facebook and my homepage, weston.com. I have an Instagram where you'll see some of my private life and some of my official
I'm the
artist
same.
work. Yeah, I think it's better to be honest and share whatever it is you're doing.
Absolutely, and being the human behind the art as well, I guess, it's nice to see. Oh, fantastic. Well, I've really enjoyed having this chat with you, Stig, and I am really keen that people do head over to your website, or if they can get to Copenhagen or Barcelona, they can come and meet you or see you work in person. That would be really wonderful. And there is so much more of your work that we haven't really had chance to chat about. There's one of the things very quickly I really liked, I think back from 2002 was one called If These Walls Could Talk. I was quite I really quite liked that because it really did look like you were the images were sort of an X-ray through the walls of the building that you'd lived in, as I understood it. So yeah, I really liked it. Yeah, I mean, I love all of the work that you've done. But yeah, that was all of them definitely eye-catching and make me stop and have a look. But yeah, I really like that one as well. So
thank you very much for that. That was an interesting time and place for me. Again, I really recommend this pushing yourself, challenging yourself with what you do, where you and if you go traveling, you take holiday snaps maybe, but try and do something more as well. That was part of a stay I had in Berlin, where I lived in an artist commune that was temporary, just for a summer, in an high-rise building that was going to be torn down. So it was occupied by artists,
yes.
And we could do whatever there. And it was Berlin, so it had this communist feel. And
Wow.
I did the walls and the atmosphere of the building there.
Yeah, well, people should definitely go and have a look at your work, all of it, and I'm personally inspired by it. So thank you so much, Stig, for joining me and having a chat with me, and hopefully one day I might see you at a festival.
Yes, hoping to get to meet up one day.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stig.
Thank you very much.
It's been fabulous to chat with Stig, and I learned something new from each photographer that I speak with, and I really hope you do too. It's so fascinating to find out what motivates people to create the art and how nature also inspires that. If you'd like to share your story and how your photography relates to the environment or raises environmental issues, or if you work in a photographically eco-conscious manner, I'd love to hear from you. So just pop over to my website, josiepurcellphotography.com, and get in touch via the contact details. I hope to hear from you soon. Bye.